Hey, what's up, everybody? Kevin here for Turn 1 Soul Ring. Please remember to rate, review, and comment on our content wherever you listen to the show. It really helps us out. We appreciate each and every one of you. Now let's get to the show.
Turn 1 Soul Ring.
We're all here.
We're all here.
We did it. We're going to do this. We came here to do a show. It only took us 45 minutes to figure it out, but we're doing it.
Nobody said it was easy.
No, they didn't.
I mean, that's fair.
I used to work with these people that said a lot of stupid things, and one of them was that when they heard a siren, they would say like, "Hey, so-and-so," like let's say, "Hey, Riley, your ride's here."
Ha.
Yeah, I didn't think it was very funny either. I'm going to welcome everybody to the show. It's Turn 1 Soul Ring. I'm Kevin.
I'm Eric.
And I'm Riley.
Today on the show, we're going to be talking about some cards that have been casualties of power creep in the Commander format, but across other formats as well. And what we mean by that is cards that no longer see as much play as they once did due to new cards being printed that do similar things, but in a more efficient way. And we're not just going to be talking about cards that no longer see as much play. We're also going to be talking about some cards that were essentially reprinted, but made better.
Yeah.
And the great thing about cards like that is in the Commander format or in any singleton format, it does give you that little bit of redundancy if you do want or need to take advantage of it in that regard.
Yeah.
But before we get to that, we do want to briefly touch on the new banned and restricted announcement that was made at the time of this recording this morning, May 18th. So we have, none of this really affects any of us, but in Brawl, Drannith Magistrate is banned, as well as Winota, Joiner of Forces is banned. So two new Ikoria cards. All these cards are Ikoria cards. Legacy, Lurrus of the Dream Den is banned. Zerta the Dawnwaker is banned. And Lurrus is also banned in Vintage, which is something that doesn't happen too often. Cards usually just get restricted in Vintage.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty big.
It's definitely very big, and we can see why like Lurrus is so crazy, because once every turn you're getting back, there's so many mana rocks, and you can get back a Black Lotus and just get 3 more mana on your next turn with Lurrus.
Yeah. And restricting wouldn't do anything because it's a one of in the sideboard to begin with, right?
Yeah, like it's a card you're going to have every single game.
Can you have more than one companion in your sideboard?
As long as you meet the restrictions of your deck. Yeah.
Well, they just to go a little bit deeper into this, they both in Vintage and Legacy, the decks that had Lurrus as their companion, and it was a few different decks. Those decks were seeing an above 55% win rate on the Magic Online League play, and that's how they explain why they banned it in both Vintage and Legacy. They go on to talk about Zerta the Dawnwaker was also banned, not because it's become a problem yet, but they think that it will in short order, especially in combination with cards like Grim Monolith. You can get infinite mana very easily.
Yeah, just like making infinite mana that way. It's pretty crazy.
And, we can talk about Brawl a little bit. We were talking about it a little bit before the show, and Drannith Magistrate just shuts off all commanders, and they want to get that out of there. And Winota, Joiner of Forces, they said they banned it because it was just seeing a lot of play and creating a environment that didn't have a lot of diversity.
Yeah, Winota is definitely very powerful. And being able to always cast it on turn 4, you're just going to get so much value.
It's just interesting to see that Boros has been behind for so long, and next thing you know, the only worthwhile commander to play in Brawl is banned.
Yeah. Definitely would have been fun, because you just play like 1 and 2 drops, and like there's that red card that gets you a human and a creature and stuff, but you want to get a bunch of like non-human creatures, right? And you play Winota on turn 4, and then you attack with all those non-human creatures, and you get all those triggers to get humans out of your deck, and you're probably getting a ton of value that way.
Yeah, and I mean, like most token makers create like, a 1/1 soldier which is not technically a human. So
Right? It is a non-human.
yeah.
And like at the end of all banned and restricted announcements, they talk about the other formats that did not see any changes and that they're keeping an eye on those. I'm sure in Modern, they're keeping an eye on the companions. I haven't heard too much about Pioneer and the companions in that format. Have you guys heard anything about that?
Yeah, no, they just said that they were keeping an eye on it, and I really haven't seen too much stuff. I mean, you see like, Garuda ramp in Standard. As far as like its competitiveness, I don't really know. Like, there's ways to shut it off. There's a couple. I mean, like you've got what's the name of the 1/2 flyer with lifelink that shuts off ETB and died triggers?
Hushbringer.
Hushbringer. I can just see the artwork, all the mouths. But you've got like tools you can use to work around that. I think just the companion mechanic is troublesome in a number of formats, and I'm surprised they didn't look at Modern for any of these bannings as well, because I for sure see that's the next place companions are going to break the format is in Modern.
Well, they already are, kind of, because like we see a bunch of Luris stuff running around, which sucks. And then also, I was like looking at Pioneer before this, and again, there's a bunch of Luris decks, and also Yorion. Yorion is just like a really good card. Mm-hmm. And having an 80 card deck isn't such a bad thing when you have it done in a certain way. So
yeah, I mean, 80 card deck doesn't really matter if you have like a 5-mana 4/5 flyer that blinks all your stuff, like when
for
it
value.
The battlefield. Just always, like, you always have access to it.
Yeah, and I've definitely played. When Standard first came out, I actually did build a Garuda deck, and deck feels really disgusting. Even when people play stuff to turn it off, you just have so much stuff in the deck that works together. And you have a lot of life gain as well, so like aggro decks have trouble against it as well. It's super solid, and I'm not the biggest fan of playing it, and playing against it sucks, and yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like the biggest hurt for Companion is just that it like, Magic is a very, very much game built around variance and like the ability for different gameplay experiences and different events happening during gameplay, and Companion just kind of, it gets old really quick.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's it. It gets old really quick. We're seeing these same like top 3 or 4 cards, and you just always have access to that card. Always.
Yeah.
So before we get on to our list of cards today, Eric, how can listeners get in touch with us?
Alrighty, so people, you can all find us on Instagram at Turn One Soul Ring the podcast. If you want to contact us directly, send us any what haves you. We do have a Gmail account, Turn One Soul Ring the podcast at gmail.com. And then also you can find our podcast on YouTube as well, if that's easier for you. So check us out on YouTube, search Turn One Soul Ring the podcast, and make sure to type in the podcast.
Also find us on probably any podcast platform you can think of, unless it's a very obscure one that we don't yet know about.
Yeah.
A card that I want to mention right up top before we get to the lists is Explosive Vegetation. I want to mention it because we just saw the printing of Migration Path in Ikoria, which is Explosive Vegetation with cycling. And I think it's likely that over the next several months, we'll see the popularity of Migration Path rise while Explosive Vegetation wanes. And I think this is a perfect example of a card that hasn't been pushed to the point of being a casualty of power creep, but soon will be. And of course, that being said, I think most decks that are running Explosive Vegetation are running it as a redundancy because there are more efficient cards, I would say, that already exist.
Yeah, and I would say that Explosive Vegetation now more than ever is kind of getting to that point of being a victim, just given that, you've got Circuitous Sprout, you've got Sky Shroud Claim. Like, I've rarely seen Explosive Vegetation outside of like a super budget build. Maybe I've rarely seen Explosive Vegetation being played anymore.
Yeah, like, get some money. Am I right?
But I mean, Circuitous Route, like, that's easily a budget include as well. So
You're right.
I mean, there's tons of printing of Sky Shroud claims as well, but I think they might be $1 or $2.
Yeah, because they were reprinted in Battle Bond, so they're still. I think they're probably around $1. That's probably a pretty good estimate. Well, let's move on to our lists. I think we all did something a little different with these, but Riley, would you mind if we started with you today?
Sure.
All right, let's do it.
I'll kick things off just talking about, I guess, not necessarily a specific card, but an example is a Grizzly Bear. So straight from Alpha, a 2/2 vanilla creature. It used to be at some point in time, or at one point in time, that green got access to these kind of stat lines, and every other color kind of had a different iteration or a different way of providing you a 2/2, but most came with downsides. Nowadays, it's becoming like more and more rare to see a vanilla 2/2, just straight up 2 power, 2 toughness for 2 CMC in any color. I mean, you look at Ikoria, for example, you've got Drannith Healer in white that cycles for 1 and gains you a life whenever you cycle a card. You've got Drannith Stinger, which is the same kind of body in red, but it deals 1 every time you cycle a card. You've got Durable Coil Bug. This is probably the closest from the set that you've got to a vanilla 2/2. Basically, if it's in your graveyard, you can pay 4 and a black to return it to your hand, which is not great. You're rarely going to do that, but still, it's got slight upside over a vanilla creature. And you've got Essence Symbiote in green, which just cares about mutating things, gaining you life, putting additional counters whenever you mutate a creature.
That is a really great example of power creep. Starting from the card that we referred to all 2-mana 2/2s by.
Good old bear.
I mean, the only time I could see a Grizzly Bear being played in Commander is if you're playing the what is it, Irulia? Queen of Bears?
Ayula?
Ayula?
Yeah.
At that point, you're just scraping the bottom of the barrel for any bear you can find. So,
and probably if you wanted to, I think maybe a better build, or at least maybe a more resilient one, would be if you built a Grizzly Bear or a Bear tribal deck around Morophon, because you could get all 5 colors in there.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
And then you get all the changelings that can be bears, so you have a good time.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, I'll start with my my first card. I guess my first card was kind of Explosive Veg, but my next card is another green card. It's a Naturalize. This is I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago, but this is a great example of a card that I definitely don't see in decks anymore. There are, I'd sooner run Crows and Grip because you have the split second ability, even though you have 1 more mana. But we did, again, just see the printing of Naturalize with cycling in the form of Wilt. So even if you weren't already running like Deglamour or Unravel the Aether or even Nature's Claim, which is 1 mana with a slight downside, you could just run Wilt. And you might want to run it for the redundancy or if you're in a cycling deck, but Naturalize is just one of those limited sideboard cards that's probably one of the only places you're going to see it anymore.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, totally.
And even something like Return to Nature is Naturalize with exile a card from your graveyard or from a graveyard as another option, right? So
right.
There's just so many Naturalize effects that are way better.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that. Absolutely. Yeah, and that was just printed. That's right. It's like they're constantly making Naturalize look worse and worse, set over set.
Yeah.
Just looking for better ways to make it slightly better.
Yeah.
Right.
In a vacuum, Naturalize is not a bad card. It's a good effect, but it's just there's so many more options out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What I was trying to find, so for this, I was trying to find cards of like same cost, do same things, but have like certain ones are just better.
Right.
So the first couple pairs I have here, a little bit of deep cuts. But this was a popular card a while ago, and we have a Crush for 1 red, which just destroys a non-creature artifact. Good removal just for 1 red. But nowadays we have things like Deface for 1 red, and you can choose 1, destroy target artifact, or destroy target creature with Defender. So not only is it hitting a non-creature artifact, it's just any artifact, so it could be a creature as well. If you have that offsite of somebody having a Defender, you can also do that.
Yeah, it's good against Arcades.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And I mean, like, even in Ikoria, we've got, like, Shredded Sails. It's 1 in a red, but you can deal 4 damage to a flyer. You can destroy an artifact, or you can cycle it for 2. So, like, even something like that, I would argue is stronger.
It's definitely stronger. Yeah. It's 1 whole more mana, though, Riley.
That's true, but the flexibility at many points in the game is way stronger.
Yeah, for sure.
Also, Throne of Eldraine gave us the Embereth, which is like the adventure card. 1 red destroys an artifact, and then you still can play a creature for 2 red. So, well, red and anything.
Right.
Yep. Yeah, nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, Crush has definitely been outclassed.
Throne of Eldraine giving us good stuff.
Yeah, that's a very, very powerful set.
Well, the next one on my list here, any kind of significant downside for a big dork. And what I mean by that is an example in Rotting Regisar, which is a 3 mana, so 2 and a black, for a 7/6 that says at the beginning of your upkeep, you discard a card. There's no other text. You don't have to, if you don't meet that condition, you don't have to sacrifice Rotting Reggie. Once upon a time, like if you're looking at a comparable stat line, like 3 mana for a big dork with some downside, like Cosmic Larva, for example, 1 red for a 7/6. It's got trample, but it says at the beginning of your upkeep, you either sacrifice Cosmic Larva or you sacrifice 2 lands. So I would say sacrificing 2 lands is a huge downside. But, if you wanted to push through that damage and keep it on the battlefield, the following turn, you got to sacrifice an additional 2 lands. And at that point, you're probably out of lands, so you just wasted all these resources on a 7/6 that was fragile from the beginning.
You have to sacrifice those lands, unlike Rotting Register, where if you have no cards in hand, you don't have to discard any cards, right?
Yeah, exactly. Another example that I had found is Phyrexian Soulgorger. It's 3 mana for an 8/8 with cumulative upkeep of sacrifice a creature. So at some point, if you don't have enough fodder to feed the Soulgorger, it will inevitably sacrifice itself.
Oh, yeah.
That's a crying shame.
Yeah.
One of my favorite small mana big dorks is called Eater of Days.
Oh, yeah?
So it's a 4 mana 9/8 with flying and trample. When Eater of Days comes into play, you skip your next 2 turns.
You just need a torpor orb on the battlefield and you're golden.
Yeah. What about original Leviathan from the Dark? It's 9 mana. It's 5 and 4 blue for a 10/10 with trample. Leviathan enters the battlefield tapped and doesn't untap during your untap step. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may sacrifice 2 islands. If you do untap Leviathan, Leviathan can't attack unless you sacrifice 2 islands.
What?
Isn't that terrible? And it's a rare.
What?
Yeah.
Of course it's a rare. Yeah, 35 cents, Card Kingdom.
It's amazing. Man,
my God.
Creatures have come a long way, that's for sure.
Yes.
Kidding. My next card is Solemn Simulacrum. So this, I'm sure everybody knows what this card does, and if you don't, look it up. For the longest time, this card would just go into all commander decks, unless you were in green. It's certainly when I started playing, I saw this card a lot more, which was about 5 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
Now then there were better options more efficient options for 4 mana to ramp, but there's even more of them now. So unless you're running this in a deck where you can reuse ETB triggers as well as death triggers or abuse them, then I don't think you really need to be slotting this into every deck. I don't think this is an auto include anymore.
Yeah, how can you make Sad Robot even more sad?
Leave him in your binder.
Just never play him again.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's still a couple decks where I slot him in, but you're right. Like, unless you're actively reusing his ability, he's just clunky.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I definitely used to play him a lot more than I do nowadays. Didn't even notice until you said that. I was like, yeah, you know what? I'm not actually just like jamming him in a lot of my decks anymore.
Eric's like starting a deck list. He's like Solemn, Simulacrum, Soul Ring, Arcane Signet. Okay, who's the commander?
Yeah.
Yeah, unless you're like mono white or mono red. Or just mono desperate.
Well, now in mono white you can run that new Hawk from Commander 20 that puts a land right onto the battlefield.
Yeah, perfect.
That
This
bird.
card's so good.
Oh god. Oh man.
I already bought a playset. Are you guys proud of me?
What, a playset being one, or did you buy 4?
Yeah, I guess a Commander playset is one.
My next card pairing I have here starts off with a Seed Spark back in the good old Ravnica days. So this one I went a little bit off base. They both have an extra ability on these cards. So Seed Spark's 3 of anything and a white. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. If green was spent to pay Seed Spark, put 2 1/1 green sapling creature tokens into play.
This seems pretty decent.
Yay, 2 1/1s.
Yeah, and this is just like the new the new Mythos cards from Ikoria, right? Like if you spend whatever to whatever color mana, yeah.
But what I think is just overall better is our new Ray of Distortion. Oh wait, this was a reprint from Odyssey. Well, that card's newer than that one. Anyways, Ray of Distortion, 3 of anything and a white. Destroys an artifact or enchantment. It does have flashback for 4 of anything and 2 white. So you can reuse this again. And getting rid of enchantments are always hard to get rid of, so having ways of being able to do that again is always good.
They are the hardest to get rid of.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, 6 flashback. Nice. This probably stayed in your deck all season, right?
Oh, straight up. Yeah. Getting those soul ring points for destroying soul rings.
Oh yeah.
Get them.
I think you had to. No, it was exile or destroy. The clause was that it couldn't be yours.
Yeah, but yeah, there was the one game I think I spent 4 mana to get your soul ring, and I got a point.
You sure did. I think you got more than 1 point on that one.
That's fair.
I'm looking forward to somebody blowing up their own soul ring. That'll be good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it will happen.
Oh, I'm sure it will.
Yeah. Yeah, I got to get those points. The next category I have. Not really specific by any means, but it's
just the cards in general have gotten more powerful.
Rip those do-it-yourself jank commanders, you know? With all these made-for-commander products, like the precons, the brawl decks, you've got new cards, a couple, for example, Chulane Teller of Tales, Corvold, Fey Cursed King. It's hard not to just find yourself like jamming these new commanders because they're just so freaking powerful. Like I've seen a couple Corvold decks and it doesn't take much to just take it over the top. Like you just throw a couple of Evolving Wilds in. I mean, you throw a Sakura Tribe Elder, you're just drawing cards off of what you'd be doing anyways. Like sometimes the biggest downside to these precons or these additional products is that it just makes it a little bit linear. And I guess I like my own play style of trying to find janky new ways of playing the game. So that's for me. But I just need more jank commanders. That's all I'm asking for.
Yeah, and like we just our episode last week was about Riley built a deck around a janky commander.
Yeah.
And I totally agree with what you're saying, especially about Chulane and Corvold, where so much of this made for commander product, especially the commanders themselves, the legendary creatures, so many of them now say either draw a card or ramp or both. And it's so hard to not want to just build around those commanders because they're so much more powerful than, even a commander from 2 or 3 years ago that doesn't say either of those things.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's like, and then in a way, they're just trying to push power so often, and then sometimes we don't get these like commanders that have weird abilities that are harder to build around, and it could make it more fun to try and build a working deck around some of these other creatures. It's just something we're seeing less and less of.
Yeah, and the next deck on my list is Norn the Wary. Oh, it's gonna be so good.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah. I can't
Genesis
wait.
Chamber, what Darkside extortionist.
Nice.
It's gonna be great.
Very, very spicy. The next section I have here is a couple of cards, but it's really, I have here Manalith and Darksteel Ingot, and it's really any 3 mana rock that doesn't do anything else except tap for a single mana. I think, everybody, let's just stop playing with these cards because they're not as our decks are not as good as they could be. So I think especially in the last couple of years with all the new rocks that have come out, I think that's part of the reason why we don't see these anymore. I'm sure you can make a case for Darksteel Ingot because it is indestructible, but there are so many good 2 mana options as well as 3 mana or 4 mana rocks that either tap for more mana or do other things, like even the Ravnica lockets or even Bonder's Ornament. As it does something else other than just tap for a mana. I'd sooner run Bonder's Ornament than I would run Darksteel Ingot. Even in 5-color decks where you need that kind of mana, I don't see this kind of thing going on.
Oh man, I still flip. When I'm going through my artifact section of my binder, I still see my Manalith sitting there. I'm like, oh, what a sad day for Manalith.
Yeah, and even we got those in Ikoria. We just got those the new versions of the Khans banners, and they have cycling, so they're just better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love those. Yeah.
Cool. Next up, we've actually talked about this one. Naturalize.
Ooh.
And Return to Nature is just better.
There you go. Strictly better.
Yeah, I had that written down on my list as well as Explosive Vegetation.
Yeah, great.
I skipped right over them.
So let's move on to Riley. What else do you have for us?
Cancel. Poor old Cancel. Yeah, there are if you're in the market for a 3 mana counterspell, which there's a lot of 2 mana counterspells that will probably be better. But just in the realm of 3 mana counterspells, you've got Neutralize, cycles for 2. Admiral's Orders, if you raid, so attack with a creature that turn, you can pay blue to cast it. You've got Archmage's Charm, which is blue, but it's got so many more abilities. You've got Disallow, which exiles the spell that you're countering. You've got Dissolve or Sinister Sabotage, which Scry or Surveil 1. You've got Forbid with buyback of discarding 2 cards. And you've got I think I mixed that up. Disallow counters activated abilities such triggered abilities, and Dissipate is the one that exiles the card when it is countered. But yeah, they're if you're looking for a 3 mana counter spell, please don't play Cancel. There's so many better options out there.
If you're playing Cancel, what are you doing?
So
yeah, unless your deck is literally all counter spells, don't play Cancel.
And if your deck is all counter spells, you're probably not going to have a lot of opportunities to play it with other human beings.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was actually one of my points. I had a bunch of counter spells in place of Cancel because, again, I'm on the same page as don't play that card. There's so many better options.
Yeah.
And while we're on the subject, I had Void Slime on my list as a card I genuinely did used to see a lot more play of because it is Disallow. It's easier to cast and it's only a single color. So why would you run Void Slime unless, like everything on our list, you'd run these cards if you wanted redundancy.
Yeah, for sure. Another counterspell I really like because it is only 1 blue, and people should look at this card, is Swansong.
Oh yeah. Have you seen the price of that lately?
Yeah,
great.
I know our play group sees it a lot, but I just remember going out and playing and never seeing somebody play Swansong.
It's so good. And who doesn't like birds?
Most of the time you're going to be countering an instant or sorcery spell, so it's totally worth it. Or enchantment.
Yeah, the enchantment on there just I think really boosts that card up to really good value.
Yeah, if you want another good 1 mana counter spell, Abjure from Weatherlight is really good, but an additional cost to it is you have to sacrifice a blue creature. So I have one in my Talrand Sky Summoner deck. So if you're sacrificing a token, it's the cost there is not nearly as much as if you're sacrificing a blue creature.
You know what you do? You Swansong your own instant. and then you use the bird that you just created to abjure.
That's the best play.
That's
obviously
next level. Yeah, natural 3-for-1 for your opponent. But
All right. Well, my next card is Burnished Heart. So this is the last piece of ramp on my list. And again, I talked about Myriad Landscape and Crows and Verge during our Upgrading C20 episode. And I largely think the reason why I don't see as much of Burnished Heart as I used to is for the same reason why I would remove it from... Why I would remove the aforementioned lands from most decks. And the reason is speed. When I think of ramp, I think that I'm getting ahead on mana, obviously. I also want to be doing it fast, and ramping fast is something that Burnished Heart really doesn't do. And I definitely still see it in decks that can repeatedly recur artifacts, but otherwise, there again, not to beat a dead horse, but there are just more efficient and consistent ways to ramp. I know part of the argument for Burnished Heart is you can use it as a blocker and then sacrifice it. But to do that, you need to hold up mana. And do you want to be holding up mana in the early turns of the game, or would you rather just be using that mana to ramp, right away?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think Burnished Heart is just overall too slow. It's 6 mana to get 2 lands.
in white or red or blue.
Blue, I think, is even better to just draw cards.
Probably.
Yeah,
and Burnished Heart for sure is a clunky card, but it's got a soft spot in my heart.
And it's I think all bovine creatures have a soft spot for you, Riley. Or you have a soft spot for them. Maybe both. I don't know.
Yeah. We just have a connection. Oh man, I was looking into a Gigantha deck for Elk Tribal.
Oh boy.
We need more Elks. That's all I gotta say. Is I need more Elks in my life.
Yeah, there's definitely not very many Elks in Magic.
No way. And if you want to ramp for 6 mana, you can always just put a Dreamstone Hedron in any of your decks, and then late game you can draw cards.
I hate that card so much.
Even you could dump 6 mana into an Everflowing Chalice.
There you go. Even better. Not really.
Hey guys, you know what'd be better than a Mind Stone? A Mind Stone. 3 Mind Stones into 1 Mind Stone. No, Mind Stone is just way better.
Yeah, no doubt about that.
All right, so the next pairing I got coming up is, I really like this one. So, Tranquility is a 3 mana, so 2 of anything and a green, to a sorcery to destroy all enchantments. But we now have Back to Nature, which is 1 less, so it's only 1 of anything and a green. And it's an instant to destroy all enchantments.
Yeah, that's just way better.
Straight up just way better. And I'm surprised, because Back to Nature only has 2 printings as well.
You're surprised that you don't see it more?
Yeah. And I guess it's because it does destroy all enchantments, so it can hit your own.
Yeah, and I think even though enchantments are a big part of the game is in Commander, I don't think... Unless someone is that's their dedicated strategy and you know it and they're in your meta, I don't think it's always worth a slot in your deck to run a card that just destroys all enchantments.
Yeah, if you're playing a Commander 2018 League and somebody's running an Enchantress deck.
Then you want to bring out the Back to Nature.
Yeah, I'm not salty about it. I think that card is probably the biggest reason why I always got wrecked so hard. That and Torment of Hailfire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my last point here, it's not a card specifically, but it's a zone. And that zone is the Exiled Zone.
What?
Yeah. The further and further along we get into Magic, the more and more you'll see interaction with the Exiled Zone. And it used to be the Exiled Zone was written in a way that it was remove this card from the game, right?
Right.
And the card was gone, right? Effectively gone from the game. You weren't getting it back. You weren't touching it. It's just gone. It's well past the graveyard. But now, you'll see, in War of the Spark, for example, with the Cycle of Gods that they had, where if it dies or if it's exiled, you can put it third from the top. And you see more and more like these interactions with the exile zone, which is kind of cute. But at the same time, I just feel like at the end of the day, there needs to be a space for the exile zone for things to remain in exile, because there has to be an answer for everything. And if we're starting to see more increasingly that there's more interaction with the exile zone, then it just becomes a second graveyard.
Right.
Yeah. It's like, what do I put my creature into my first graveyard or the second graveyard?
Or the way we have mass graveyard recursion spells, are in the next few years, are we going to see cards that do that, but for the exile zone? I don't know.
Yeah.
I surely hope not.
Yeah, that would be scary.
Yeah, even like we had the Eldrazi like playing around with the exile zone as well not too long ago.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and we've had a couple of cards here and there like Pull from Beyond or Rift Sweeper, but they're definitely few and far between.
Yeah, for sure. It's just the more Wizards likes to play with that space, the more scared I get.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I was definitely not the biggest fan of the gods that you just can't deal with them.
It was just bad design. Like for limited, they were just total bombs, and it was a bad experience. It was just like, what do I do? Do I do I have an Ashiok have a way to kill the god and then mill the god into the graveyard? Like that's one of the few ways you could have dealt with it in that limited format.
That's like what you had to do, and it's like, are you serious?
Yeah, it was so many hoops to get rid of this already huge bomb, right? It was just salt in the wounds, I guess.
Yeah.
The next couple of cards I have are all removal spells. So I have Mortify, Putrefy, and Return to Dust. These are cards that definitely still go into the precons. Definitely Mortify and Putrefy, and cards that I definitely used to see Return to Dust a lot more in white decks a few years ago. But I'm not exactly sure why I don't see as much of Mortify. I think that maybe just Path and Swords are more efficient. They're definitely more efficient forms of removal, even without the flexibility. And Putrefy, if, with the printing of Assassin's Trophy, it's one less mana and you can hit any permanent, so why wouldn't you run it? The downside is they can go get a basic land, but your opponent can go get a basic land with Path to Exile, and that sees a ton of play in Commander.
Yeah, for sure. And in Commander, that's not nearly as big of a downside, just because, you've got two other opponents to deal with as well, right? So giving them an extra land is not the end of the world in most cases, unless it's like super early game and it's just ramping them into the next big threat.
Yeah.
And with Return to Dust, last year, Crush Contraband was printed, and it's just, it's sort of like it is a strictly better version of Return to Dust, so why would you even run Return to Dust unless you were doing it for redundancy's sake? And it's easier to cast.
Yeah. Strictly better is kind of hard to use for Return to Dust for Crush Contraband, just because it hits one and or the other, right? Like it can't hit two enchantments, for example, right? So Return to Dust could hit two enchantments.
Right. Yeah, you're right. If you cast it during your main phase.
Yeah.
That's true.
Another one to consider is Dismantling Wave. Like that's another one we saw in the new Commander decks. That can get up to 3 permanents. Of course, it can only be one of each opponent.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm never a big fan of cards like that, like Windgrace's Judgment. I'm never a big fan of cards that sort of stack with your opponents and you can only take from one opponent. That's why I like Decimate so much in the Commander format. You can just decimate one player, or you can spread it around.
Yeah. Yeah, and generally speaking, like I think it's more of just gravy more than anything for Dismantling Wave, because I'd just love to cycle that thing. Like it's just going to wreck people and you're going to replace the card, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
All right. I have a pair of cards that just has a better printing, and the better printing is one of my, it's a really good card. It sees a lot of play. It's good and limited. So we have from way back, there's a card called Weakness. It's 1 black, enchanted creature. The enchanted creature gets -2/-1. And then Enfeeblement was kind of an upgrade. It's 2 black, and the enchanted creature gets -2/-2. And they're like, well, let's just make everything all better. And we have dead weight, which is only 1 black to give the creature -2/-2.
Yeah. And Myra's Grasp from Theros, which is -3, 1 and a black for -3/-3.
Yes. So again, it's like a enfeeblement upgrade straight up. Even a better mana cost to get a better -/. So
Right.
Yeah.
And as the creatures get more powerful, higher power toughness, they have to do this to weakness. Enfeeblement is a really fun name for a card, though.
Yeah,
it is.
How come we don't see Terramorphic Expanse anymore? It's always Evolving Wilds in standard sets.
I mean, there's just way more printings of Evolving Wilds.
Yeah.
Compared to Terramorphic Expanse.
Right.
Who knows? Maybe in the future we'll see a standard set with Terramorphic Expanse if it fits the theme.
Yeah, I don't understand the reason why. Like Terramorphic Expanse is just always in Commander.
Yeah. Yeah, it's probably just like a flavor thing more than anything. Because they're functionally the same card.
Yeah.
So I have a pairing here. It's Prismatic Omen and Dryad of the Elysian Grove. Previously, Prismatic Omen was a really good, and it still is a good budget option for 4 to 5 color decks that you don't want to spend an arm and a leg to put lands into. Even though it's like a $30 card, and part of that is because it's from Shadowmoor, but Dryad of the Elysian Grove is like $10 to $15 right now. And it is 1 more mana, but it lets you play an additional land and does the same thing that Prismatic Omen does. So I just think, it's not necessarily strictly better, but for the player, it is cheaper to buy if you don't want to go nuts with 4 to 5 color land base, because those do get very expensive.
They definitely do.
Yeah. Yeah, he's pretty spicy. Like 5 color Valakut.
Yeah. All right, so the last pair, we talked about some other ones, so the last one that hasn't really been touched on, I threw in a little bit of a Planeswalker one. And so we have Chandra Pyro Master. Yeah, and the one thing that really pairs up to Chandra Torch of Defiance, both these cards are 2 of anything and 2 red. Chandra Pyro Master for 0, you can exile the top card of your library and you may play it this turn. Chandra has a +1 to exile the top card. It is cast instead of play, but if you don't, you deal 2 damage to each opponent. Or also for the +1, you can add 2 red mana. And then they both have a -7. And I would argue that Torch of Defiance again is just way more powerful, because whenever you cast any spell, you deal 5 damage to target creature or player.
What about like the flip side of power creep, where you've got like Jace? Oh man, what's the brainstorm? Jace,
the Mind Sculptor.
Mind Sculptor. Yeah, and then you've got Jace Cunning Castaway from Ixalan.
Oh, I think they did Cunning Castaway for flavor reasons, so he's like a shipwrecked boy.
I know, but he's just so horrible.
Yeah.
It's just so bad.
And I think that's a really great place to start to wrap up the show is Planeswalkers and power creep surrounding them, and on a bit of a larger scale, just the last year or so of cards that were printed. Like, they've pushed the power so much, and it's changed all these eternal formats, like the bannings we just saw today and the bannings that we're probably going to see in the future. But all those Planeswalkers that were printed in War of the Spark and forward, they're so efficient. The mana cost versus the loyalty that you get is just so good compared to the way that they used to be.
I definitely have to say the one thing about pushing the power level of the Planeswalkers as well, War of the Spark, giving the Planeswalkers a static ability, so they're also like an enchantment on top of being a Planeswalker, has been just ridiculous. Yeah. And we've seen Narset is really good and sees so much play. Little Teferi is incredibly good. I hate that card. I always forget that. Oh yeah, I can't cast instant spells anymore. That's great. Like.
I think it's all thanks to Tybalt. that we're seeing planeswalkers at lower costs that are so powerful, because Wizards, I think, was just like shaken to its core and embarrassed about Tybalt, that they just had to step up their game.
Sure, they're like 2-mana Planeswalker. He's super bad. Let's make a Ren in 6. This is good. Like,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Let's just break legacy.
yeah. It's like the total opposite direction. There is an in-between. There can be.
Yeah, it's really interesting to look at Tybalt and fast forward a few years and you look at Ren and 6 and just that disparity. It's incredible.
Yeah.
It's quite something.
Yeah, right?
So I just, I probably should have done this up top, but just a little disclaimer. All the cards that we talked about today are just concerning, are mostly concerning our own play experience. And, a lot of the cards we talked about still have a home in a lot of decks. But I would say that overall, there was a time when, you'd put these cards into any deck with the right colors, but that's just not the way things are anymore. And that's going to continue to happen as, sets get released and this game goes on for probably another 25 years. What do you guys think?
I've just gotten my mind brewing on a naturalized tribal deck, where I play every naturalized effect in like a liquid metal coating.
Yeah, well, you can also play tranquility no, you just want to go for artifacts with and you could throw Mycosynth Lattice in there too. Have some fun.
There you go. Yeah.
Although if you wanted to take the alternate route and go for the enchantment type build,
Sweet.
then what is it? It's Enchanting Evening is the card that turns everything. Yeah. So you can do that too.
Can do both. It's naturalized tribal.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Well, we are going to wrap things up for today. And you please send us any angry emails about how you still love to play with all the cards we just talked about, or for any reason, of course. We'd love to hear from you. Yeah, let us know, because you could get with that Planeswalker, you can just get a ton of Jaces going, right? That's how he works.
Or if you like to play Jace Cunning Castaway in all your decks.
Yeah, think about all that value. We'd also like to thank our lovely editor Ainsley for editing the show every week and all the work that she does on her end. If you want to get in touch with us individually, you can find me at Command Beacon on Instagram. Riley, where can we find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Riley_Dayton, or you can find me on Twitter at RilesDayton.
And of course, check out all the links in the show notes. And we want to thank all of you for listening.
Thanks so much.
All right. Stay safe out there and keep washing your hands.
Yeah, wash those filthy hands.
All right, bye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Turn 1 Soul Ring.
Oh, I think I hear a train.